My name is Nadine Black, and I am an enrollment advisor here at the Middlebury Institute. Specifically, I work with prospective and newly admitted students for our International Trade and Economic Diplomacy program. Just as a friendly reminder, please keep your microphone muted throughout the duration of the presentation. We will have time for Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions that come up during the panel, please feel free to drop those in the chat and we will make sure they get addressed during the Q&A portion. You're welcome to have your camera on or off. And I will hand it over to our career and academic advisor for this program, Scott Webb.
Thanks, Nadine. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited for this event today. I am a career and academic, excuse me, I'm a career and academic advisor here at the Middlebury Institute. I got my Master of Public Administration here in 2007, so I'm an alumni. After I graduated, I spent about 7 years working in the international development sector, mostly focused on humanitarian projects for mostly nonprofit NGOs. I was also a recruiter a few times. So I came here in fall of 2015 to be a career and academic advisor. I've been advising the trade students since I started here. It was not naturally it wasn't really my expertise, and my network wasn't really built up in trade. But in the last 7 years, I've come to work with a lot of trade students. I've had probably, 200 students come through the program by now. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different students going to a lot of different places. And I think this is one of unfortunately, it feels like a best kept secret because the program's always been really small, but it's been incredibly successful. Every student who's come here has gotten an amazing job. And we've got, 5 alumna that are here, to speak with you today that I'm really excited to hear from. So I want to give a quick overview of the trade program. I just want to give you guys, those of you that are watching that are potentially going to come and study with us, what the program looks like and what the requirements are. So if you'll allow me to share my screen for a moment. So this is the current degree in international trade. There's 5 core requirements. They're each 3 credit courses. A 3 credit course is typically 135 hours of work spread out across a semester. So, we have all students take policy and data analysis, trade policy institutions, trade economics and applied analysis, trade law dispute resolution, so you get an idea of trade law, and a class on negotiation. This is our traditional trade negotiation class that all trade students have taken here. We also require 4 credits of language or intercultural competence. And then we have plenty of room for electives, totally free electives where you can take any of the classes at MIIS. And so a lot of students have dipped into things like our development classes, our non-proliferation and terrorism studies classes, financial crime management. You can take, our trade courses and things like strategic export controls, economic statecraft, 21st century trade issues. There's courses on negotiating the global development process, the classes from our Professor Wei Liang, for example. All students are required to do a 6 credit practicum now. This practicum is designed to be in your final semester, your final term. It can be based on a professional engagement like an internship or a job, or if you're going to be working while you're going to school, you could use your work, especially if it's trade related. Your work could be a part of your practicum, basically. As far as pacing, it can be done intensively if you start in the fall, where you do fall and spring, and then you do a 6 credit practicum over the summer. So you could graduate in a year. You could also spread it out by taking classes in fall and spring, and then into the following fall, you do 10 credits, where you can, you can complete 42 credits that way. If you were to start in spring, these are the other ways that you could do it, kind of how you could pace it if you wanted to. We also have joint degrees now, where you can get a joint degree in trade and public administration, where, for example, you do the same core requirements, and then you do the core requirements for the MPA, which would be classes in organizational management, program evaluation, budgeting, and power, social change in orgs, kind of like for mission-driven organizations. One of our panelists actually did this degree, Pia. And then there's the ITED, our trade and policy and development degree, where you're doing, again, the same trade core requirements, And then there's actually shared core requirements because the IPD degree has requirements for policy and data and economics. So you're taking care of that through the ITED core. So there's only 2 core requirements where you do a research methods course and a development policy course. Our joint degrees have an 8-credit requirement for language or intercultural competence. The Middlebury Institute here in Monterey, we highly value language skills or intercultural competence skills. So we've integrated that into your degree. You can actually do a 12-credit language for professional purposes specialization using up some of the electives that you have. You can see in this joint degree, there's 25 credits of free electives. And I should say these joint degrees are actually 60 credits instead of 42. So you can pace it like this, where you could do it intensively, where you do, you have your final term being, you do 54 credits in 3 semesters and you do your final practicum, in your final semester. Or you can spread it out and be taking electives concurrently with core classes and do your practicum alongside other courses. All of your courses that you take here can be done remotely. There's very few classes, there's maybe 1 or 2 classes where the professors want it to be in person. But for the most part, every single course that you need to complete your trade degree here at the Institute can be done remotely. So, we'd welcome you here if you want to study, hybrid, where you're here some of the time and you're away other parts of your studies, or you can be, not in Monterey, and you can do this part-time or you can do this full-time. So really excited about this degree. Really excited to hear from the alumni today. I want to let the alumni introduce themselves. And I will start with my former advisee and colleague, Julius Moye. I want to say really quickly, Julius was a graduate assistant here in the Center for Advising and Career Services. So I got to work with him a lot. And he was actually here where he started as a trade and policy and development student, and then changed to be a joint trade and nonproliferation and terrorism studies student. So he was actually here for a solid 6 semesters. So I got to know him pretty well. So I'm excited to have him moderate the panel today. And I'll turn it over to you, Julius, to to kick this thing off.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate that handoff, and really appreciate the fact to be here. It's great to see y'all, and great to see some familiar faces as well. So yeah, excited to be moderating this. As Scott mentioned, my name is Julius Moye. I'm originally from Massachusetts, did my undergrad there at Tufts University. Currently live in Texas, but I'm calling in from outside of Chicago and Illinois, as I'm up here for some work travel. So Scott mentioned I was a student in the International Trade and Economic Diplomacy program. However, Miss and Scott in particular were incredibly helpful in me kind of putting together a bit of a Frankenstein program, which is international trade, non-proliferation, and terrorism studies, and a specialization in financial crime management, which is kind of where I ended up in my career. So working as a senior compliance analyst at a cryptocurrency exchange, and hence the Bitcoin paraphernalia in the background as I'm calling in from the office. But really excited to be here, coming back to those roots in international trade, not only because it was really where myself and as you'll hear, all of the other panelists here kind of got their start and took their careers, but also, as we'll discuss a little bit later, I spent a lot of time working with a really prominent organization called Women in International Trade of Northern California. They're in the Bay Area, and I think they have helped myself and a lot of my other colleagues kind of get a foot in the door in the industry. So with that, I want to kick this off, and enough about me, hand it over to our excellent group of panelists, and just to go around, do a red robin to introduce yourselves. So would really love to hear just about, where you're from, where you grew up, and where you completed your undergraduate studies, and after going on from that, when you graduated, and where you're currently working and what position you have there. And also feel free to throw in a little bit about what led you to that path if, you had graduated a little while ago. So I'll hand it over to you, whoever would like to kick off first.
All right, I'll go first. Somebody has to do it. Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Stringer. I graduated from MIIS with a degree in international trade policy in 2008. So it was several, I think, iterations ago. I grew up in Los Angeles, went to undergrad at San Francisco State. My bachelor's is in international relations. Currently, I am the trade director for the California Fresh Fruit Association. I am based out of my home in Sacramento, but our offices are in Fresno. Is that, Julius, is that everything, or did I hit all the points?
That's excellent. We'll continue to dive into your experience as we go on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'll volunteer.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Anthea. I'll go after you.
I knew it was going to happen. Anyway, my name is Anthea Cook. I am from Humboldt County, California, way up north. And I came to MIIS just after graduating from my undergrad at Humboldt State University in 2013. I actually lived in Fresno way back in the day. I went to high school there for like 3 months. But MIIS was really my first opportunity to dive into international economics and international trade. Graduated from there in 2016, came to DC after having done an internship in DC in between my first and second years. And I've been in DC ever since. 2016 was a really weird time to move here, but I started a job at the Department of Commerce, and I was an international trade analyst there, kind of pursuing international crime as it pertains to anti-dumping and countervailing duties. And I did that for 5 years and got promoted a few times and just transferred over to the Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, Office of Trade, Office of International Engagement, if you want to break it all the way down. And that's a relatively new office, and my new mission is a lot more, friendly. My new mission is really to connect US customs to other foreign government customs and to promote and facilitate trade, promote development of their customs mechanisms, and to sort of promote US interests abroad. So I just got back from a trip from Kuwait. We have one going up in Vietnam. So some really interesting contrasting work, working at 2 different trade agencies in the US.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess I'm up. Hi, everyone. My name is Pia Park. I graduated MIIS in, I want to say December 2020, if it's already been that. And for me, my story kind of started with a scholarship. I was teaching abroad at the time, and I was introduced. Monterey is actually my home, so my family were quite over the moon when I decided to come to MIIS. So I chose the ITED and the MPA program during my time, and that kind of led me to different opportunities with actually USDA and WTO, the World Trade Organization. So that was really awesome. And now I'm currently working for the Global Trade Advisory at Deloitte. So, and I believe Anne-Marie, I'll leave ping pong it to you.
Thanks so much, Pia. Hi, everyone. I'm Anne-Marie. I'm from Turlock, California, which is in the Central Valley. I went to California State University, Monterey Bay for my undergrad, and I decided to stay in Monterey because I loved it so much, and ended up going to MIIS. I was a first-generation college student, so it was a really great opportunity to get a degree in ITED, and I ended up, like Anthea, going to the Department of Commerce and working as an international trade compliance analyst, and I'm about to hit 2 years there.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us and doing those introductions. And I'll leave it with you, actually, Anne-Marie, and great to see you again. Would love for you to paint a little bit more of a picture of what you do in your current position, and to give an idea of what you're doing on a daily basis, and more generally, what excites you about going to work each day. And I guess what excited you about starting the position in the first place, and then what excites you about it on an ongoing basis.
Clearly, I'm having fun muting myself. I'm sorry. So yes, I'm a international trade compliance analyst at the Department of Commerce, where I focus in anti-dumping and countervailing duty investigations. And I get to look at specific products that are being sold to the United States and see if they're being sold for a less than fair value. And it's a really enjoyable job. I'm relatively still kind of new. There's a large learning curve with it, but I've really enjoyed being able to travel on certain cases. I was able to go to Korea and Belgium, which was wonderful. So definitely travel is a big pull for the job for me. Previously, I had done some work with the U.S. Commercial Service as an intern and with the Washington International Trade Association called WIT-NC. And through that, I was able to see what I would ideally like to do. And I really fell in love with commerce at one of the panels that we had done through WIT-NC. So.
Thank you, and congratulations on that role, by the way. I'm just going to go backwards the way that we did the introduction. So Pia, from the private sector perspective, where you are right now, I would love for you to tell a little bit more about what you do in your position and the things that excite you about your work.
Well, I think anyone could say who is in consulting is that no day is the same day, for sure. So everything is always a surprise, and you're just learning something new on the job every day. So I think that's one plus there. And just as a day-to-day nutshell, our practice is kind of divided into 3 quote-unquote buckets. We work on clients with either export, import, and also automation. I'm more in the export and automation side of the house, but we have a lot of clients all throughout and a lot of expertise that our clients come to with specific cases such as anti-dumping and countervailing duties, just run-of-the-mill, what we learn in the classroom, and kind of seeing the clients kind of go through it in person and kind of helping them go through that process has been a massive learning curve, and exciting that I'm putting my master's degree to use. So yeah, it's been a great plus every day.
Excellent. Yeah, it is wonderful to be able to apply that in the field. Anathea, I would love to hear as well about kind of what you're doing on a daily basis in your position. What excites you about your work over at DHS? It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so we're a relatively new office because CBP's Office of Trade is relatively small compared to some of the other U.S. agencies' trade missions. We have about 1,100 people that work in the Office of Trade as a whole, and like 5 people in my office. But I will throw out there for many of your students and people considering work in international trade, of those 1,100, we have to hire 250 next year. So we're changing rapidly. Retirements are always on the table. A lot of people are eligible in government, so government is going to be hiring a lot in the next few years, I assume. It'll be interesting to see how the in-person office model changes. Like right now, I don't have an assigned desk. We have a hoteling desk situation. And in fact, I was even hired into CBP during COVID. So I didn't go in for the first year. I got hired remote and everything. But I really enjoy my job. I really enjoy the mission of connecting with other customs offices. You get to learn a lot about how our customs systems work and how it is trying to be more modern with some of these digital systems that we use for importers and exporters to import all of their documentation by certain dates, and how we have this very transparent review system, and how other countries just don't have those things. I recently heard a story about some import safety issues that were really odd. So you get to learn a lot about how our system works and about how international trade really looks like around the world. And in my job, all I get to do is offer a helping hand. So we've been doing a lot of trainings, substantial transformation training in Vietnam, intellectual property rights training in Kuwait. We're working on these country profiles for different countries to get a really good sense of their trade picture, like in the moment. So our office is doing kind of a lot of things, and we're still growing and modifying and figuring out our perfect mission. But CBP at large has 7 things that Congress essentially said are their laundry list of trade issues, and those are agriculture, anti-dumping and countervailing duties, free trade agreements, import safety, intellectual property rights, revenue, and textiles and wearing apparel. And if you've ever worked with any other one of those topics, or if you've ever written a paper on them, you probably have a job at CBP, because it's truly a battle, and those are our main mandates. But I will say that our emerging issues have a lot more to do with the origin of some of these trade products. So like we're looking at like forced labor issues and illegal logging and illegal fishing as well. And generally how to make trade more green. So all sorts of issues are being addressed at CBP, and I didn't know any of that when I started government. So it's been really interesting learning a lot.
Excellent. Thank you. And Caroline, in terms of some of the work that you're doing, would love to get a little bit more insight and clarity into that, and what drives you in the space.
Sure. So California Fresh Fruit Association is an advocacy organization that represents 13 fresh fruit commodities in California. And I work most of the time on stone fruit market access. So that's peaches, plums, nectarines, and apricots. And I also get to travel internationally, which is, it can be fun. I'm about to leave for about 3.5 weeks, going to Asia and then Central America. So that is going to be fun, but also exhausting. So I'm looking forward to that. I think the fun part for me is after spending, years in my undergrad and then grad school learning about trade policy, and I can be pretty wonky on the policy side, learning about case studies in SPS, which is sanitary and phytosanitary measures, or TBT, which is technical barriers to trade. Now I'm actually working on those things on behalf of an entire industry here in California. And so I work with state government, federal government, and then also foreign governments on these issues that impact our ability to export stone fruit. And then sometimes some of the other guys have their own trade associations that work on that for them. So that's probably 80% of my time is spent on stone fruit and market access. And then I also manage our grant programs where we do marketing. So that's like the fun side, where we use grant programs to market in certain countries. And so sometimes I'm in really intense meetings talking about like pesticide residue limits, and other times I'm at like a tasting menu, how you can eat stone fruit and pair it with wine and stuff like that. So it's not always really heavy stuff that we're working on. So every once in a while I get to go to a nice little reception and have a new dish made with stone fruit and things like that. But yeah, I think that's kind of in a nutshell. I think it's just really rewarding to see the fruits of your labor, but not to use a pun, but I get to see the impact of what I'm doing in the family-owned businesses in the Central Valley, where I also live.
It's fantastic, and I'm a sucker for a good pun, so well done. And I think you touched on it a little bit, so I'm going to throw this out to the group here, since we have a panel full of experts. Is just to get a sense, can one of you tell us about what the field of international trade is? Why is it important? I'm sure over the last several years, we've seen all kinds of different news headlines about it, but from your perspectives, being immersed in the field, what's going on now? What do you think the future holds, and why is it an important field to get into?
I feel like it's either Anthea or me again, racing to this.
Go for it, Pia.
Anthea, I will lean on you to jump in as well. But for me, I think you can go in a bajillion directions with this question, but I guess something that has been in the news for me that I actually wrote up today, it's either like things like Russian sanctions that were, if anyone's been reading the news, there's been a whole lot of things happening regarding that. And in addition to that is forced labor. There has been a Forced Labor Act legislation kind of released in the past year, I want to say, and that has really kind of, put the timer, I guess, if you will, on companies to make sure like, hey, where are your supply chains? And you need to be more transparent. And I think that has kind of like taken away this cover, if you will, on these companies that really are trying to protect their know-how and their trade secrets behind that, but also making sure that goods are being made fairly with good labor and without child labor. And I think for a lot of the issues that at least I've studied in school, being able to kind of see this come to the forefront has been super exciting. Anthea, I'll leave it to you to segue.
Yeah, I think that Pia makes a lot of really good points. I think that the lens that you're taught how to see through at MIIS really changes your perspective on the world and on the news. Kind of like if you've ever learned how to play an instrument or learned how to read music or sing, suddenly the radio's ruined for you. Like, I know all three of these chords, it's like just a little bit different. You see it differently, you hear it differently. You can see what the real talent is as opposed to like auto-tune and things like that. As soon as you have this international trade focus, suddenly the news makes sense. Suddenly everything is about the economy, everything is about money, and the influence that certain countries use when it comes to politics, it changes everything for me. I suddenly see myself as a macroeconomist and I'm looking at the big picture all the time. And I don't get caught up in the smaller aspects. Like, it's just a very different way to see the world. And I think that it's really helped me to be a better analyst in every way. So I think that international trade is one of the, like Scott was saying, one of those best kept secrets. It's like this bigger picture and looking at how the world works. It suddenly makes sense more.
Best kept secret indeed. And Anne-Marie, I do definitely want to pick your brain on this one too, if you don't mind. Just kind of giving your 2 cents about what's going on in the field and why is it, from your vantage point, an important one.
So I don't think I ever was truly, when I was in school, thinking of going into international trade. And when I entered MIIS, I found all these different things that international trade was involved in. It's truly involved in everything. Anything you want to buy, anything you're doing. And on Commerce's side, in AD/CVD duties, we look at very particular products, and I learned how that thing is made from start to finish and how it enters the United States. And through my job and through this field, I have been able to understand so many things I would have never considered before I entered and got my degree in international trade and economic diplomacy.
Thank you. So I do kind of want everybody on the panel to think back to when you first learned about or became interested in international trade as a full-blown career path. I know there's obviously a lot of different avenues that one can travel in your career within international trade, and you all represent some really great opportunities within that. So kind of looking back, what was the thing that first piqued your interest about the space? I guess Anthea, if you wouldn't mind chiming in on that one first.
Yeah, so actually my interest in international trade started just before I came to MIIS. I had done a study abroad in China. In fact, I had done 2, and I had lived in Beijing for over a year. And I think that what had struck me most about that experience was how can 2 very different economic systems serve their people in such different ways to such different results. And I wanted to know more about that. So grad school it was. And I did learn a lot about that. And I didn't really know where that career would go. I sort of just followed my passion and my interests. And I really dove in at MIIS and got as much out of it as I possibly could. And then I met some alumni, and honestly, that was the big thing. I mean, MIIS has a really great alumni cohort. There's a huge one here in DC. The idea of working for the government really appealed to me. And I was able to meet, I think it was 2 different MIIS alumni who were working at Commerce at the time, Kabir Archuleta and one other one, I can't remember right now. And they were kind enough to sit down with me, tell me about the work, and offer to help me try to get an internship there, which is where I interned. And then it was a pretty straight shot into DC. packing everything into my Prius and driving for 4 days was long, but I got here 7 years ago, and I've really been enjoying it. And there is a lot to do. Deloitte is right around the corner. There's all of these international consulting groups and international trade groups. And I worked for a California company when I was living in Shanghai. There's tons of work in international trade, both private and public, and that revolving door we always hear about. I'm excited to see where it could take me anywhere.
Excellent. So speaking of Deloitte, Pia, what got you interested in international trade from initially?
Well, I guess my story really started from the policy lens, and just kind of reading through all our classes together, Julius, and just, our trade negotiation class, Professor Rogowski's class. We had an awesome cohort for 1 and for 2. It was really kind of seeing, where things, how things are made and where do they come from. I think that's kind of my curiosity, and it helped that I like shopping. And so you have that too, but on face of it all, it was just what you see is kind of, how many companies are, rallying to get to that shelf that you get to most often, to put in like light terms there. And so just kind of the politics and the economics all behind that was really fascinating to me. And then that kind of led me through a rabbit hole of going all the way to the World Trade Organization and interning there, and then really seeing that in a macro level that Anthony was talking about a little bit there, and just kind of seeing countries really battle out things in the room, and just kind of seeing everything that we read in the classroom just kind of coming to life in person. And I think that was a really like a big game changer for me, is just at a point where I keep going with this policy route, or I kind of take a step back and kind of see what exactly companies are handling these issues that are coming to life in this said WTO room. And things like SPS and TBT. I attended conferences on this. I haven't heard that in a little bit, so that was exciting. But yeah, so I guess in a nutshell, just kind of my policy background really just shaped my career towards private, if that makes sense. So.
Excellent, thank you. And Caroline, if I could get your thoughts on what was the spark for you?
So I might be a little bit different. I think probably since I was 12, 13 years old, I wanted to work in the international, something to do with international business. And I hadn't really thought of what industry, but I really just always was interested in international commerce. And then when I was at San Francisco State, I think just because of the proximity to MIIS, I had already heard about MIIS. And so when I graduated, I just kind of started working in a job I could find. I wasn't sure if grad school was for me. And so I took a few years off, and then I just realized that I still wanted to work in international policy or international business, and that I really needed to go back to school to make that happen. So that's when I started looking at MIIS and the trade program. I'm of all the programs that they had at the time, and I think obviously it's a little bit different now, but that was what speaks to me. When you're saying take a couple econ classes and trade negotiation, that's what gets my my pulse right going. And I don't know, maybe that seems silly, but I just think it's so fascinating. I agree with Pia, when you find out where things come from, where they're made, or how what Anne Marie was saying, like how things are put together and then shipped, all across the world, and how that impacts consumers, but also businesses. I think it's just, you see how much our lives are touched by international trade, and you want to be a part of it. And the more you learn, the more you don't know everything, right? And so you're just constantly learning new things. And I think, just in the ag world, and you can ask Scott, I'm always trying to evangelize coming and working in ag. So I just think I didn't grow up on a farm, but I think the ag policy and ag trade policy is probably the most interesting thing I'll ever work on, just because it is so messy, and there's always issues to resolve. People always need to eat. So I think there's good job security. And I think working for farmers and growers, they're some of the most wonderful people you'll ever meet in your life. And I certainly am blessed to work for a really great industry. So there's that too.
So Anne-Marie, also thinking back a little bit, but after you had already made the decision to apply to the international trade program, did you have a specific career path or a specific employer in mind once you decided to make that dive?
I don't think I did. Well, I did and I didn't. I'm a third generation farmer. And so for me, I actually wanted to work in agriculture. But I had no real job experience in international trade. And so I did a lot of research in California's agricultural industry, in the crops that my family grew, and other things. And through that, I did an internship at the Commercial Service promoting agricultural businesses internationally, which was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. And then I found out more about compliance and how shipping things works, and I decided to get a little bit more experience and decided to end up at Commerce with it. But I don't think when I first started MIIS that I actually knew what I wanted to do. I really liked my background in ag. So I wanted to be in ag, and if anyone in my cohort remembers, that was my thing. For sure. I always had almonds and snacks and always promoted the industry as much as I could. But I was a first gen, and so my family didn't actually understand why I was getting a graduate degree, and especially in the field I was doing. But ironically, agriculture needs international trade the most. So it was, I thought, a great fit.
And we were all also a big fan of your almonds and snacks, so thank you. I'm going to throw this next one out to everybody because I know at MIIS and in the Bay Area, there's a ton of, and all over the world, frankly, there's a lot of really amazing internships, immersive learning opportunities, networking opportunities, things like what I had mentioned before, industry association, Women in International Trade of Northern California, who helped to co-sponsor and co-promote this event. Myself and several other MIIS students had served on the board there. A ton of us had been, members of WIT-NC, and there's just an excellent networking opportunity. And I know all of you have had a plethora of different really exciting internship experiences while you were at MIIS all over the world. So I'm going to throw this one out. Just tell us about some of those experiences that you had during your ITED program that, helped to jumpstart your career and get you to where you are now. And anybody can take this.
I'll start. I did in between my first and second years, I did an internship up in Chico in Northern California for the Center for International Trade Development. I think that office is closed, but there is one in Fresno still. So that was where I first started working on ag issues. And I learned all about the prune industry and the walnut industry. Those were the two big ones that I worked on a few projects on. And from there, I think that is probably had the most to do with how I ended up getting my internship with the Foreign Ag Service. So right after I graduated from MIIS, I went down to Lima, Peru, and I did an internship for the USDA's international branch down there. So I think those are like the two things that really solidified. I actually got working experience in international policy in ag. And got my feet wet and decided, okay, I think this is for me. So.
Yeah, for me, it was that like I discussed, was I had done the week in Washington, D.C. spring break trip, which is where I got to, the week before, cold email a whole bunch of MIIS alumni that were in the area and asking them to meet with me individually. And one of them did, and I met him at the actual like mixer at the end of that DC week. And that was really my connection to an internship in DC, working on ADCVD issues for 3 months. And that was just the straight shot into government and into commerce, where I stayed for 5 years. So it, again, was just really that alumni network.
I can jump in here. I guess for me, I interviewed for the WTO, and I guess that was like a summer plus the fall semester. So what Scott was showing you guys earlier, I was able to flip a little bit of my last semester and do my final international trade practicum while I was abroad. So I did that in Geneva, and then that led to my next internship at USDA Trade Policy Group for processed foods. So just to keep the ag flag going. I don't know who's left.
I think it might be me.
All right.
So I did several internships, kind of all at once, because I don't know if I think that through that greatly, but the pandemic had just hit. And so I decided the greatest idea was to do like 3 internships all at once. So I interned for the Washington International Trade Association here in DC, but I did it virtually, of course. And it's a great place to get more information on various trade topics. So working there, I was able to explore things that I hadn't really considered. As I said previously, I was very ag focused. And so it really piqued my interest to learn more about forced labor and other soon to be negotiated trade agreements. And then I also interned for the commercial service, and it was mostly for promoting agricultural tech companies. And I was the liaison between the companies and the governments. So I would join these calls and help them prepare basically what they would promote to the foreign commercial offices, which was really fascinating for me. One thing I would echo, though, is to definitely reach out to your alumni. MIIS alumni are great. They are always willing to answer questions. If you're interested in the Department of Commerce, you're welcome to reach out to me. I think it is a wonderful opportunity that you have so many people in so many different fields. As we already discussed, that trade is so wide. Really, you can contact so many people that you didn't consider before.
Thank you. And gonna do the next one real quick. I see some great questions coming in the chat, so we'll kick it over to Q&A here in just a second. But I did want to, for the last question, we'll just go around really quickly, for you to think about during your time at MIIS doing the ITED program, what were the knowledge and the skills that you acquired while earning your degree that you found most helpful in your current position today? And Anne-Marie, I still see you on my screen, so how about feel free to tell us about how that's impacted your career right now.
Sure. So I literally took courses in anti-dumping and countervailing duties. So it's very applicable for what I do currently. A lot of the things I learned helped me when I entered the job. And I did realize when I entered that it was unique to have such a specialized knowledge base. And a lot of other people that were hired for enforcement and compliance at Commerce didn't necessarily have the background that MIIS gives you in this field.
Thank you. And Caroline, what about yourself? What were some of the skills that you learned during your time at MIIS that helped you in your current position?
Well, I definitely will say having a foreign language is always helpful, even if you're not necessarily working in the market that your foreign language is in. I think it just studying another language helps you immeasurably. And but again, I speak French and I went down to Peru, so I learned Spanish pretty quickly out of necessity when I was down there. Also, I will say that the economics, the trade analysis, that's stuff that I use frequently. And also the trade negotiations is something that, where I'm working on negotiations between the US and other countries right now. And so understanding the history of relationships and how negotiations typically work helps me do my job better.
And Anathea, what about yourself? When you were at MIIS, what were some of the things that really helped you in the work you're doing now?
Yeah, I think that, I also have a unique background in that I didn't graduate high school. I dropped out freshman year. And so even though I'd had my undergrad experience and I loved that, MIIS really made me a better writer, a better reader, a better editor, and a much, much better negotiator. I loved that trade negotiation class. I'm pretty sure it's embedded in my personality now. And being able to get that perspective on the world, like I talked about, that macroeconomic perspective, those are things I learned in every class in a little way. And like Anne-Marie was saying, that experience that's specific to ADCVD is really unique. There aren't a lot of master's programs in international trade around the country. So I found myself uniquely qualified in the field when I graduated.
Oh, and last but not least, Pia, what about yourself? What helped you, succeed in the consulting world for international trade?
I mean, everyone has already said all the answers that I could possibly say, even if not better. Just language, being able to put yourself in perspective and like the way you present things, whether like you're translating technical information to a non-technical audience, everyone needs that, if not more. And two, I would say just my personal experience at MIIS, like you are always working in teams. I think the biggest takeaway is being able to work in team, being an awesome team lead, and just trying to help support others around you. And if anything, just all the legal background that you gain in the classroom, that you actually see and understand the news. And hey, you might even be that friend translating the news to your other friends and saying why it's important. So it really comes in full circle. So, and Julius, I'd actually might even ask you, what was your favorite takeaway?
Oh boy. I think there's one of the things that, and I'll make this really quick, that Pia, you touched on really well, is working in teams, but also having a large cohort to see what the different opportunities are. I think that's one of the things for me in particular. There's so many different paths to go down. A lot of us didn't even really know what international trade meant before we started the program. So being able to, just in a general level, be able to dive into that topic, but also see the different variations and shades within it. So getting into those nuances has helped not only succeed in a particular career path, but help to navigate the plethora of career paths in general. So yeah, it's an excellent question, and I can see that it's worked out really, really well for all of you and so many other MIIS students. And with that, I see some great questions coming in, so I'll kick it back over to Scott for the Q&A. And again, just wanted to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. It's great to see y'all again, and it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Julius. It's great to hear from you all. Let's see. I want to echo something that Anathea and some of the others were saying about how unique the MIIS trade program is. It really, so we are educational sponsors of the Women in Trade of Northern California group up in the Bay Area. They host these networking sessions every month. Usually, I think it's the second Wednesday or something like that, second or third Wednesday of every month. And they're really interesting. They're mostly trade compliance people, and they're very generous with their time, and they love having MIIS students there. And we've been attending these events for years. And I have never been there at an event where there's a student from Stanford or Berkeley or Santa Clara University or San Jose State. You know, this is the Bay Area. There's, you know, billions, there's trillions of dollars, you know, of Fortune 500 companies and you know, many multi-billionaires in the Bay Area. And none of the schools in the Bay Area are producing students with trade compliance and commercial diplomacy skills like we are. And it continues to be the case. Yes, there are students studying international affairs where they may touch on trade, but they're not getting the hard skills that, you know, our panelists have described. So I wanted to get that out there. I do want to cover a couple of questions. We had a great question in the chat from Nina. This is a question for the panelists. What is the hiring environment like today with regards to remote positions? She's a mid-career person looking for a commercial diplomacy position, but, you know, isn't able to like relocate to the capital or move. Of those of you that are here as panelists, how many of you are actually working remotely where you don't have to go into the office? And you know, or do you have to go into the office occasionally? Like how has it worked for you? Even Julius, if you want to chime in.
For me, I guess I moved from DC actually about 2 months ago, so I could be part of the New York office. So I'm a bit of a unique case in that. But for the most part, our entire team, which is like 100+ members across the states, we're all very remote, like completely remote based. Julius, I'll hand it to you.
Well, so I'm working in the financial crime, the anti-money laundering space. So I work fully remotely, except for today when you happen to catch me in a day when I'm in the office traveling. We had to meet with some regulators. But yeah, a lot of the folks in this kind of area of the field, we work, a lot of us get to work fully remote.
I'm a little bit on the other side of the pendulum. I do work remotely from my home office, but I go down to our office quite frequently, or down into the Fresno Bakersfield area for meetings. I also go to DC a lot, and I travel internationally a lot for meetings. So I think the reason that working remotely when I am kind of just home based or at like the desk is because I'm out a lot, you know, otherwise. And I don't know how common that is in this industry with like the trade association. I think maybe as things, you know, progress and more workers are asking for remote possibilities, that's something that we'll see more of. But, you know, you got to learn how food is grown and how it's packed and processed, and you can't necessarily do that from like YouTube videos and stuff. So I think there is always going to be, at least in the ag space, an element of, you know, being on the ground or in the office, you know, present. So I'm like a 2.5 hour drive from Fresno. So it's not that far.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Anne-Marie was going to have a similar experience to me, but it's been a hybrid situation for a long time. When I started in government, there was no telework, but you sort of build up, and once you learn that material, you can like telework once a pay period, twice a pay period, up to 4 times a pay period, which essentially is you're home 2 days a week. In my current position, because I got hired during COVID and because I don't really have a desk, I didn't go in for a long time. And now I go in up to 2 days a week. But like everyone was saying, as COVID has changed sort of the work culture, and because we have such a huge need when it comes to hiring in government, and I will say 2 of the people that we just hired in my office are fully remote from Ohio and Salt Lake City, I believe. And so I expect that there will be a trend and that you will see more USA jobs for remote positions. It'll be interesting to be sure.
And just echoing her, I go in 3 days a week and I work remotely twice. But I started originally officially like fully remote. So it's been an adjustment to go back. That started like this month. So at least for our department, we are teleworking twice and in office 3 days.
That's great. Thanks all for the feedback. I've noticed, I mean, just from my standpoint and seeing the kinds of jobs that are coming across, both in the trade space and the development space, there's a lot of work that is moving remotely. There's a lot of places that are, if they're not advertising officially that it's a remote position or a remote friendly position, oftentimes you can actually bring it up. Is this a remote friendly position? Could I, would you consider me as a candidate if I could work remotely? And, jobs are remote for different reasons. There are jobs that are remote because you have to travel all the time. I mean, and so it's a work-life balance issue. If you need to be in a particular location for family reasons or, financial reasons or whatever, if you need to be there all the time because, you have to be there to pick up your kids and that kind of thing, that's one reason to work from home. And then there's also, you're working from home because you have to travel all the time. And so because you have to travel all the time, it doesn't really matter that you're in a particular office. So there's both kinds of jobs, I think, in trade, depending on the kind of thing you're doing. Whether it's a highly data analytics driven position or something where you have to go out and meet with people all the time, like in a commercial diplomacy setting, or in a trade compliance setting where you have to work with clients and things like that. So there's a lot of different kinds of opportunities. Natalie, who's a former student here, actually, she asks, do you know about opportunities for international students and professionals? I know everyone on this call, everyone on the panel is actually an American student. So you didn't have to deal with, the kinds of issues that maybe international students have to deal with. What kinds of organizations have you seen would hire international students, like non-American citizens, into different kinds of positions?
I can just start off. I do know that my internal team does hire like non-American citizens as well. I think it's just a different process, but that is available to you. And in addition to, I believe most of the big four, if not like adding McKinsey and, Boston Consulting, as PwC, I think they all do for the most part. So I think it's just a matter of like networking further and kind of seeing and applying and also just getting that clarified from the get-go.
So we're all right up against the time. Nadine or Carol, are there any sort of closing words you want to share with everybody related to recruitment or preview days, updates, things like that?
Oh, yes. Carol, my wonderful colleague, put some suggested next steps for all of you who may be prospective students. If you have any questions about the program, career opportunities, scholarships, our admissions process, anything, my email is in our chat. If you're already in the field and you have, you'd like to recommend someone to apply to MIIS, our Go link and our phone number is in the chat as well. We've also included a link to other preview day sessions that are coming up. For the next couple of weeks, there are going to be some more virtual webinars, and then there will be an in-person event in mid-April. So if you'd like to actually come to campus and see what MIIS is all about, I'd encourage you to check that out. And lastly, there is a scholarship opportunity. If you have been admitted or you're to MIIS or any school really, the National Council on International Trade, they offer a great scholarship. Their next application deadline is April 28th, and the link is in that chat as well. So we just really want to thank all of you for coming. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, moderator. Thank you, Scott. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. You're great.